Court calls case, People State of Michigan versus Bordeaux Jr.
Alexander on behalf of the people broker.
Morning, Rob J. Phil on behalf of Bordeaux Smith, Bordeaux Station.
Ms. Zeta, this is your motion.
Thank you. At this time, the people are going to be requesting that defendant's bond be set as denied in this case. As the court is aware, this case was originally charged as a GBH strangulation and a domestic violence charge that was remanded to this court at preliminary exam. Since the time of preliminary exam, it's one of the people's attention that Mr. Smith has been consistently and pretty egregiously violating his bond. While he was in custody prior to the preliminary exam pending this case, he had violated his bond with his jail calls, leading to his phone and text privileges to be revoked. Leading up to exam, he then bonded out of the jail, and in that time, prior to and since after the exam, he was using
what started as a routine courtroom hearing was about to explode into something nobody saw coming. The state of Michigan walked in with one mission: no second chances. This wasn't just another domestic violence case anymore. Behind the paperwork, behind the silence, there was a growing trail of violations, deception, and chaos. Prosecutors claimed the defendant didn't just break rules. He shattered every warning the court had ever given him. And this was only the beginning.
not only calling the victim himself, but also using law enforcement 911 services to harass and track the victim. The court, I believe I sent over a few of the reports that we received with the CAD notes related to what those calls entailed. Yeah. Some of those saying there were calls that the wife referring to the victim in this case, and children are in danger, someone's trying to harm them, that they want the wife's cell phone tracked. There were other calls that were made indicating that there had been a shooting in which law enforcement responded and the scene was deemed there was no shooting and that the house was secure. Those are just some of the things that not only harass the victim, but also put the victim's safety in danger for law enforcement responding to incidents reported as shootings that's also taking up community resources. Come to find out, after the people filed this emergency bond motion, that night, the defendant was picked up by Ypsilanti Police Department, in which he is accused of stabbing.
Judge, I'm sorry, with all due respect to Madam Prosecutor, I'm going to object to the...
At first, the accusation seemed serious enough. Strangulation, violence, broken trust, shattered families. But what investigators uncovered next changed everything. Even while sitting behind bars, prosecutors say he never stopped. Phone calls, messages, secret contact attempts, so aggressive, even jail privileges were ripped away. Most people would learn their lesson there, but according to court records, he was just getting started. And outside those jail walls, things got darker.
I'm not the attorney on what may be another case, but if extraneous, she was kind enough to let me see the police report. But again, though, I don't think that should have a bearing on this bond hearing regarding harassing phone calls.
And Your Honor, I think this just adds to the bond violations that he has committed.
I'll hear. If it's irrelevant to my consideration, then certainly.
That same night, the people filed the bond motion. Defendant was picked up by YPD in to this A1 case that did lead to future charges, 3 charges of assault with intent to murder against the 3 victims in this case. In that case, it is alleged that defendant, in further violation of his bond at the time, was high and had possession of crack on him. He admitted to that to officers. And in that time span, he had stabbed 3 family members that he was residing with in the face and neck areas with a folding knife and or a, serving fork, a pitchfork of some kind for food.
The moment he walked free on bond, chaos followed. Emergency calls started flooding law enforcement. Claims that children were in danger. Claims that someone was hunting the family. Even reports of active shootings. Police rushed to scenes expecting bloodshed, only to find silence, empty streets, nothing. Investigators began asking one terrifying question. Was this fear or calculated harassment?
And that led to all 3 victims being transported to the hospital. They're now okay, but that did lead to more charges. The people also, in speaking with Pittsfield Police Department and speaking with the victim, she has indicated that at this time, due to her fear of the defendant and of what has been going on, she is looking to also reauthorize that dismissed great bodily harm strangulation charge that was dismissed in exam, and that is the people's intention as well at this time. So with all that, he said would ask for his bond to be set as denied due to these flagrant and pretty egregious bond violations that have been committed by this defendant.
Judge Schiller, briefly, the victim, as far as the phone call, has been in a relationship with Mr. Wardell for 18 years. They have 6 kids, 4 of which are between Wardell and the victim. I mean, any phone call that was ever made to check up on the kids, and not necessarily at any harassment stage. Just wanted to know that the kids were safe.
And then, guys, the story took a brutal turn. The same night prosecutors filed their emergency motion, another police department made a shocking arrest. This time, the allegations were horrifying. 3 family members, violently attacked, knives, sharp objects, blood, hospital transports. What began as bond violations was now turning into something far more dangerous. The courtroom suddenly went completely silent.
And other than that, I think the court should take that into consideration. Again,
Those are the phone calls that he made from the jail you're talking about.
the jail, and allegedly once he was out on bond, the prosecutors alleged that once he was out on bond, he called the FBI, he called the Pittsfield Township Police. But I would argue that any call that was ever made was just for the sake of the children, to make sure they're safe, not in harassment for Latronda. Is that what it is? Latronda. Again, his significant.
Why would you call saying there was a shooting when there wasn't one? How does that protect the victim and the children?
Five defense attorneys fought back immediately. They claimed every phone call had one purpose: the children. A father checking on his kids, nothing more. No threats, no stalking, no harassment. Just concern, just family, just protection. But the judge wasn't convinced. One question cut through the courtroom like a blade. If that's true, why report a shooting that never happened? And nobody had a clean answer.
My client, again, Judge, I haven't heard all the phone calls, but again, I would just argue in general, the calls were made just for the sake of the children and nothing more. And as far as the stabbing and
But was there, I guess, if that's the case, if that's what you're telling the court, I understand that, Mr. Killawall. Is there any basis for those calls?
any basis other than father of
Fine, I'm the father of children, but I can't just call the FBI and say X to them. I mean, is there a reason other than to harass the victim
Judge, other
that
than
these calls were made?
other than attorney-client privilege, any call that was made to the FBI was.
You could feel the pressure rising. Every report, every statement, every phone log was painting a darker picture. Calls to local police, calls to federal agencies, calls that prosecutors believe served only one purpose: intimidation. The victim's fear was growing. Investigators were building new reports, and now, stalking charges were being discussed. This case was spiraling fast.
Was made that saying, I know my kids are safe, don't worry about it. I mean, there may have been a second call to the FBI that says, hey, I know my children are safe. Again, everything was premised on the safety of his children. And as far as the other charges, again, I don't know if I'm ever going to be appointed on the case of the allegations that he stabbed people. I did talk to him briefly about that, but I'm not his attorney. So far he has the PD. They are checking to see if they have conflicts. If Tracy had told me they have a conflict, but they're working on that, so I don't know. But all that being said, Judge, is again, I would ask the court just to consider the phone call issue itself and not the other issue of the stabbings.
And Your Honor, I will also advise the court that the phone calls and to the victim as well as to law enforcement are being submitted as another report potentially for aggravated.
Then came the judge's final review. No emotion, no hesitation, only facts. He looked at the evidence, the repeated violations, the false reports, the growing danger to the community. This wasn't just about one broken rule anymore. This was about public safety. This was about protecting victims, and everyone knew what was coming.
Stalking charges that will be reviewed potentially this week.
Anything else, Mr. Cole?
No, Your Honor.
Based upon all of that, and quite frankly, at this point, I don't have to take into account the allegations regarding the stabbings, and I'll let those bonds happen when those charges look forward. But given the fact that there were calls to law enforcement, and I specifically asked the question so that I could be sure that there wasn't a basis upon which he was making these calls. Clearly making these calls in this court's mind upon review of the reports to harass the victim in this case. And that would clearly.
Then, the words finally came. Cold, direct, absolutely devastating. The emergency motion, granted. Bond, officially denied. No release, no freedom, no second chance. In one single moment, everything changed. A man who ignored every warning was now facing the full weight of the justice system. And trust me, guys, this story is far from over.
Be a violation of his bond as to and let me just also be clear, also as to the stabbings, well, not taking that into account, his possession and or use of a controlled substance, I think this court can take into account. And in reviewing everything, I think the defendant not only has violated his bond, but constitutes a significant danger public to the community at large, as well as specifically to the victims and the victim in this case. And so I will grant the emergency motion for bond modification. Defendant's bond is hereby ordered revoked. It will stand at denied at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't see you there.